Are you ready for Office 365? Microsoft has delivered one of the most comprehensive ways to manage data within your business, creating a new, more flexible and joined-up way for everyone to work together. Office 365 has received an enthusiastic reception, charting faster growth than any other Microsoft product. But if you're in charge of technology within your organization, how do you ensure that everything is running smoothly? How will you handle feedback and perceptions of performance within your organization? And what will you do if things aren't right? I'm Zoe Buckingham, AP's Head of Marketing, and I'm here with Patrick Carey from Exoprise, one of our partners. Exoprise is a company that excels in performance monitoring of cloud-based applications. Patrick oversees project management and marketing for Exoprise, and today he will discuss the challenges involved with monitoring and managing SaaS applications, in particular Office 365. Patrick has a unique understanding of the situations faced by IT teams working with cloud-based technology and how to address these problems. I'm also joined by Mick McGuinness, one of our directors and a leading performance specialist across a wide variety of applications, including Office 365. First, before I hand over to Patrick, we'd like to ask you a question using a poll about where you are on the path to Office 365. The poll should be on your screen shortly. Okay, so are you considering a move to Office 365, evaluating or piloting Office 365, migrating users, or partially deployed and looking ahead, or perhaps just interested in the whole concept? Great, that's everybody. Thank you very much. So the results show that a lot of people are evaluating Office 365 at this stage. So you're in a good space because it's always good to consider your options. Okay, so just one last point before I hand over to Patrick. On your screen you'll see a control panel. This control panel contains a questions box where you can type questions to be answered by the speakers. Patrick and Mick will be pleased to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. We'll also be tweeting the highlights of this webinar on the hashtag BetterOffice365, so please join in. Thank you for joining us, and over to Patrick.
Thank you, Zoe. Can we close the poll and I'll move forward?
Of course, indeed.
Great. As Chloe indicated, I run product and marketing for Exoprise. And at Exoprise, we're focused on solving this problem here, that with SAS applications, IT teams typically find that they now have a blind spot. So for the applications you've been running historically in-house on your own servers, on OSs that you manage, or even if you're using a hosting provider, or maybe even running traditional apps up in a cloud provider like Amazon Web Service or Azure, your tools typically work on the basis of monitoring systems or servers. So they rely on access to log files or SNMP traps or tapping directly into application APIs or monitoring specific network nodes. All of that goes out the window when you use a turnkey SaaS application. You don't own the servers. You can't generally log into the OS that the application is running on. You have few, if any, APIs or log files that you can tap into. So a lot of customers, as they move to the cloud, will think that the admin dashboards that the cloud service providers have, most of them have some type of status dashboard. Office 365 is a pretty robust one. We'll take a look at that in a second. But it's important to keep in mind that those status dashboards are reflecting the service provider's view of the health of the systems that they operate. The real challenge that you need to think about is monitoring this service end to end. So you're moving from a systems and server monitoring model to a full end-to-end service monitoring model. And when there are challenges or problems that affect your service availability and performance, you need to be able to quickly identify the root cause of that problem anywhere in this whole service delivery chain that spans from your network through your firewall, your ISPs, and the internet backbone, and ultimately to the cloud service provider like Office 365 with Microsoft. And you need to be able to quickly determine, is the problem with the application provider itself, with your own network, or with the ISP. A lot of customers will fall into the initial trap in thinking that if something goes wrong, it must be with the cloud service provider, so they'll call or log an incident with Microsoft's support line as their first action that they take. Microsoft tells us that of those calls that they receive for Office 365 support, almost 3/4 of them end up being problems that are downstream in this service delivery chain. So if you're logging a support incident as your first step, and anybody who's gone through a service incident workflow with any application provider, you know that can take hours or even days to get to resolution. You're losing precious time for your users in resolving the problem. So when you go to a service monitoring model, you need to expand your view beyond simply tapping into log files or looking at SCOM dashboards. You need to be monitoring systems and services in your local network, in the internet, and in the cloud service provider. So locally, you need to be thinking about things like your Active Directory and Active Directory Federation services infrastructure, proxies and firewalls and internet gateways, all that infrastructure that helps you get to the internet. A lot of organizations find that even though their network has been tuned and is quite reliable for internal application access, often the way the routing is set up for access to applications and sites outside their network is not optimized, because historically prior to SAS, you're maybe accessing websites periodically. It's not a mission-critical part of the IT infrastructure, and now it is. So it's not uncommon for us to see customers that discover suboptimal routing and network configuration for to make SAS work in their organization. Downstream, looking at internet services, you need to be thinking about the configuration of your DNS entries, especially if you run an organization that has offices spread across multiple regions or even globally. DNS rules and lack of propagation of those can really wreak havoc with user access to your applications. There are also other ISP network nodes that you may want to be paying attention to and making sure that the ISP is routing your traffic correctly. Just as with internal network routing rules, customers will also often find that their ISPs will have bad routing for their traffic, sometimes crossing continents or oceans when they don't need to, and this can, as a result, really hamper application performance and availability. And then for applications like SharePoint, you may have other websites and services that you're relying on for that that SharePoint site. You need to be thinking about those services as well. In the cloud, obviously you want to monitor the apps you're concerned about, and for Office 365, the three big cloud services are SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, and Link, or Skype for Business as it's now called. But if you're using a single sign-on vendor, so Okta or Ping Identity or one of the others in that single sign-on and ADFS issues present themselves, to your users quite similarly to an actual application outage. So if you're only monitoring the application but aren't looking at the health and availability of the single sign-on solution, you could be missing out on issues that can trip up your users. So in a moment, I'm going to take you through a demonstration of how we monitor Office 365 internally within Exoprise, and walk through some of the ways that we look at these particular aspects of at the end-to-end service delivery infrastructure. Before we do that, we have another poll that to see, how are you what are you using to monitor, and how do you monitor SAS applications like Office 365 in your environment today? So are you using the Microsoft Service Health Dashboard? Do you use System Center, Operations Manager, or another monitoring tool? Or do you use custom scripts or applications? So we'll take a look at the results here. Zoe, are we able to view the results?
Yes, you should be able to see them. So we've got 50% of people saying custom scripts and applications, 33% saying other monitoring tools, and 17% saying the Microsoft Service Health Dashboard. Nobody's mentioned SCOM.
Great, great. And that's not atypical from what we see. So next, I'm going to take you through a bit on how using our tool we monitor Office 365 in our environment. So let me first start out with what you get out of the box with Microsoft and Office 365. Now, Microsoft has continued to invest in their own status tools and triage tools and debugging tools, and as a SaaS provider, they're actually quite good. But as you can see, with this detailed view of their status dashboard, it still is a relatively static and coarse-grained view. You'll see a current status, maybe an indicator if they're actually doing maintenance or experiencing an issue, but this is not the same type of fidelity that you would normally expect if you're using a tool like System Center to monitor your on-premise applications. You need to be able to get early notification and some higher level of detail that helps you find the root cause. Now, even in our environment, and our offices are based in Boston, in monitoring our Office 365 environment, it quickly becomes a fairly large extra network that delivers these services to us. So we're accessing services from both the east and west coast of the U.S., and the points that we're connecting to span the continental U.S. as well. So this is why you need to take this broader view. It's not just simply a matter of looking in your own network. Now, here's an example in the dashboard of CloudReady for a location where we're doing most of our Office 365 monitoring. So we're actually monitoring Exchange Online. We use Exchange Online. We use SharePoint, so we're monitoring that. We're monitoring Link from this location. But you see that there are also some other services that we're monitoring at the same time so that we can get the earliest possible notification if there is an issue and also get a full view of where problems may be. So this includes monitoring our ADFS environment. This also includes we run what are called wgets or web gets against certain properties, and I'll dig into that a little more to show how that's used. And we're also testing by pinging selected servers and network nodes and testing important DNS entries. But where I'm going to start is with the SharePoint application here, and I actually have this opened up here. Now, typically if you're just relying on local scripts or your users complaining, a lot of customers end up defaulting to that in the near term. It's hard to tell when you see performance or availability problems. Is it really just a localized problem, or is it a bigger issue? Now, the way we look at this is that you really need to be having a data set to compare against. And so for within CloudReady, what we do is we aggregate everybody's measurements who are using CloudReady to monitor apps like Office 365, and we allow every one of the customers using it to be able to see that as a reference trend line or a reference metric. So in this view here, I'm looking at login times for SharePoint. We've had some performance degradations over the last 24 hours. Now, I might be tempted, if I didn't have any other view, to immediately start looking at, is this really a Microsoft issue? Maybe I might log a support incident, and that's going to take me down the wrong path. And I can see that because as the sampling of other customers on this product show, there's really no parity between what I'm seeing in my location and what the rest of what we call the crowd is seeing. So now I'm going to be focusing on, well, what are some of the other downstream issues, either at the ISP level or in my local network. Now, the way you want to be able to do this is these applications, the APIs or the web applications, have a lot of different subcomponents to the transactions that can provide insight into what the root cause might be. So if I click on one of these data points, I'm gonna see that indeed I had a login time that was way above average, and I may want to look at other aspects of that website hit here. So here I have a document object model load time that was quite high, well above the average for other users. That looks suspicious. Time to first byte was a little bit slow here. So I want to dig into this a little bit more to see if I can see where this may be rooted. So any type of web application, when you're monitoring it, so SharePoint Online, or Salesforce or Workday, any of those applications, you're going through the web interface. So the first thing to look at is your ability to connect to the servers and access and download and open up the pages. So some of the things you're going to be looking at is how long does it take for you to negotiate the SSL connection, to look up the appropriate DNS entries, to make the initial connection, and then once you are connected, what's that data load time look like? Now I see some times here in terms of the time I'm waiting. This seems to map to the data that I saw on the summary screen. I might be able to compare that and see if there's correlations between waiting time and sending time. Not so much here, but the waiting time, this marries what we saw on the summary screen. So I'm going to click into that. Now, it's not just a matter of accessing the single application or the single application server, but a site like SharePoint will pull in data from a number of other content delivery networks and other content and web services, and you can see that here as I click down. These are waiting times for all of the other services that go into me being able to view that page. On SharePoint in particular, sometimes Yammer configurations can really mess up the performance that customers see. Sometimes we've had customers that will bring this page up and there'll just be dozens of Yammer hits that are on here, and that ends up being what's at the root cause of the problem. In this case here, I'm looking at timings. Some of these Yammer timings are a little high, but not too bad. I don't think that this particular problem was rooted in Yammer or these particular services. So I may want to now look at the network connectivity. What was my route to the server? What were the network conditions during that time? So I'll click on one of these points during this time frame, and now I want to look at what was happening at the network layer during that time. So I'm going to expand this bottom screen here. So here's where a lot of customers will find issues with their their routing rules, either internal to their network or with their ISP. So I need to look not just in my own network. I want to see Comcast, in this case Comcast is our ISP. I want to see if there are any excess drop packets or servers that are returning, returning responses, outside of the normal response times. At this data point, this one was fine. Maybe I can look at another one here that's got data that's a little different. Let me scroll this down here and go back to one of these. So most of these are indicating that the latency that I was experiencing was pretty far into the Microsoft network. So in this case here, although these performance degradations wouldn't be something that I would log a specific support case on, it looks like most of this was rooted in latency that was inside the MSN network inside of Microsoft. Now the other thing that you may be wanting to do on a periodic basis is just look across this service over a longer period of time, either over the last month or over the last quarter, and assess how is the availability for this service. Now this is different than specifically saying, did Microsoft live up to their SLA agreement? This is certainly part of it, but often you want to do reporting from your own locations to assess internally, is the cloud working for us? Were users, did they have ready access to the application during that time period? How long were any outages? How frequently were those outages? So one of the things you want to do is be collecting data that captures that information, and that's not particularly easy normally, either by doing this anecdotally or if you're going to do this with your own scripts, that can be quite involved. So one of the things that we do within CloudReady is provide a way to report on availability for a particular application or service over the last 30 or 90 days. The last thing that you want to be able to do is to be notified when there are issues with your environment. So this is where traditionally you would set up alarms in a tool like SCOM or BMC, and so you want to be able to configure that as well. Now those types of logging and alarms are not going to be based on log file entries, but actual measurements. So one of the things that we're doing here to monitor Office 365 is that we're actually synthetically transacting against it. So we run agents out of CloudReady that will log into SharePoint Online or Exchange Online or Link, transact against it like an actual user would, capture data, and then report that to me. And I can then configure alarms to say, well, hey, if it takes me longer than 30 seconds to log into the service for a period of 5 or 10 minutes, then I want to be notified because there's clearly something that I need to take action on. So that's one of the things that we do within the CloudReady product to help you do that, and that's especially critical with cloud services because your time to remediate can be much longer simply because you may be working not only with your local operations team for local network issues and local AD and ADFS issues, but you may be working with your ISP to resolve issues, and you may be working with the cloud service provider. Now one of the things to support that we do is, if I can go back to this, is we allow you to share this live data view, because if you're going to be resolving this with a support technician from Microsoft or from Verizon or an ISP that you use, it's going to be important to share as much information with them as possible if you believe that the problem is in their network. So one of the things that we allow you to do is to package up this data and actually share it to them in a live view where they can click around and see everything that you see for a period of time as well. So those are some of the issues that you want to be thinking about as you move to the cloud. So let me summarize here. So with the cloud, with applications, obviously with any monitoring solution, you want to be able to detect issues as quickly as possible, isolate them to their root cause, analyze performance trends, and this is where things start to deviate a bit from what you maybe have traditionally done with your on-premise applications, is that performance monitoring and availability monitoring becomes much more of an analysis process than waiting for alarms to be fired by the server or by the application. And then because you're working with third-party vendors and purchasing these services under contract, it's going to be more important for you to actively measure and report on SLAs, both for internal use and potentially to manage your vendors. So a couple of words about how you can do this with CloudReady, the Exoprise solution. CloudReady is a SaaS solution itself. Works as a hybrid solution where you first deploy monitoring sites within your location. So you'll deploy these software agents within your network, usually close to where your users are. Those agents will transact against the applications that you care about. Now we're talking about Office 365 today as our focus, but CloudReady supports a wide range of public cloud applications, and importantly it frees you from the burden of having to custom develop and maintain scripts that know how to transact against those applications. The sensors, as we call them, already know how to do that and can be set up in a couple of minutes simply by entering application access credentials. We do the monitoring by actively monitoring, as I mentioned, transacting against the application just like your users would. And we give you that access to the crowd data from a global sensor network, both one that you can create and analyze across your locations, but actually more so across the other users of the product. So you really get to see a view of how other users and how the global internet as well as your local region are experiencing that application and whether or not there are issues that affect your region or the application fundamentally. Network diagnostics is a key piece of it, being able to identify poor routing or dropped packets anywhere along that service delivery chain, and then finally allowing you to collaborate both with internal and external parties. Most of you indicated that you're in the pilot phase, and this is pretty typical for Office 365. It's growing quickly, but most customers are like you. They're in that early stage. You may think that performance monitoring is something you do after you're fully deployed, but really you want to be thinking about this early on, both because doing these transactions, synthetic transactions, and analyzing the network routing can help you ensure that the pilot goes as successfully as possible and you don't get derailed early on in your process. Then as you move into migration and you're moving more users onto it, this is a critical period where things that may be working fine when you only have a handful of users on the product can start to go sideways once you scale and start putting more, consuming more bandwidth in your network. And then once you have the users migrated, often customers will adopt a single application first. Maybe they'll start with Exchange Online, roll out SharePoint Online, and Link Online farther downstream. So often you're in a continual phase where you're always upgrading something in the process, and it's important to keep a baseline and see how those upgrades affect availability and performance for your users. So that's CloudReady. I will hand over to Mick to talk a little bit more about the broader context of performance monitoring, and then as Zoe indicated, when Mick's finished, we will be happy to take further questions. Mick?
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Mick McGuinness. I'm the co-founder and technical director of Application Performance. We're a company that specializes in monitoring and accelerating applications, and we've been doing that successfully now for over 10 years. We partner with the leading vendors in particular spaces, so Exoprise is one of the vendors that we've chosen to partner with on the SAS application monitoring side of things, but we also develop some of our own monitoring products as well, one of which I'm going to show you towards the end of this presentation. So just to summarize what we do as a company, so it's monitoring and acceleration, as I said, and we try to go end to end. So normally we start by monitoring end user experience. So that's usually the most important thing to monitor is what level of performance the end user is getting. We can monitor the network connection, which in the case of Office 365, that's obviously the internet. And there's maybe many hops involved between the end user and the Microsoft data center that traffic's going to, so lots of potential there for issues. And then you've got the back-end server, which to a certain extent is a black box when you're moving to SAS, so you can't actually get access to the physical servers, but there are still things you can do there to minimize the amount of time that you spend on the server, particularly with SharePoint Online, and having efficient code there that doesn't take too long on the server side of things. On the acceleration side, we have a number of monitoring products which we work with, which can help you automatically deliver faster page load times and also faster document uploads and downloads, which will work automatically without you having to do any manual effort. But we also provide experts as well who can help you through a consulting process to optimize and tune Office 365 as well. So that's in a nutshell what we do. Today, the presentation, I'm going to focus just on the end user experience side. And when it comes to end user experience, there's really two ways of monitoring. You can either monitor what the real user's doing, so passively monitoring real user activity, or you can do the synthetic monitoring where you're actively testing the service and testing the network and testing the components in between. So Exoprise, CloudReady, which you just saw, is a good example of a synthetic monitoring approach, and there's lots of advantages to doing that. Real user monitoring is what I'm going to show you in a second. We have a product called Tuna which does that, and there are advantages to doing that as well. And what I would say to customers is when you want to measure end user experience, it's not a choice between real user monitoring or synthetic. It's actually you need both to have the best overall coverage. So with synthetic monitoring, for example, that's giving you a very good baseline of performance because you're basically hitting the same pages or testing the same thing from the same location, from the same browser, same machine, same operating system, same location, time after time after time. So if you start to see any changes to the performance there, then it's obvious that you've got an issue. With real users, the data can be a little bit more noisy because real users, the data, I guess you've got real browsers that people use in real operating systems, and they're hitting a huge number of different pages. So sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult to kind of figure out the kind of the real issue from the noise. But the advantage to real user monitoring is that you are measuring every single page view from every single visitor. And that means that you can then, when you're troubleshooting, particularly if you've got a call into your support desk from a particular angry user, like maybe this chap down the bottom here, who's obviously very frustrated, you can even go down to looking at that individual user's session to see all the details about which browser they were using, which operating system they were on, every single page that they visited, and how long each of those took to load. So that's giving you a lot more detail to troubleshoot problems. So as I said, it's not a choice of one or the other. I think actually we would always recommend that you have both solutions in place. So the one that I'm going to show you today is Tuna. This is one of our own products we've developed for real user monitoring. And I guess one of the unique things with Tuna compared to other real user monitoring products is the fact that we are monitoring every single page view from every single visitor to the site. There are other solutions which kind of aggregate the data and will show you over a period of time, but don't let you do that drill down all the way into an individual user, individual session, individual page view, and that's what we do. So so we're able to get really fine-grained detail here. So the kind of things that this allows you to address, so first of all, is the site really slow? If you're relying on end user complaints to tell you when the site's slow, you don't really have good visibility into whether it's slow just for that one person at that one point in time, or whether it was slow for everybody. So real user monitoring is going to tell you, first of all, is it slow, and if so, how slow is it? Because slow for one person might not be slow for somebody else. Everybody's got their own expectations around performance. The next thing then is, when is it slow? Is it slow the whole time, or is it just during certain times of the day or certain days of the week? And being able to isolate those kind of trends can often pinpoint the causes of the problems if you know when they're happening. The next thing then is who's affected. So as I said, is it just one person, or is it everybody in that office, or is it everybody globally that's affected? And again, that can help you pinpoint where the problem is. So how does performance vary by location? How does it vary by the browser type or the device type people are using? You know, mobile in particular these days, the trend there is increasing. So you know, how does performance vary for somebody who's using a low-end mobile device compared to, you know, a desktop browser? And then looking at the pages, because you know, if you're running a large, you know, SharePoint site, for example, you might have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pages for some organizations, and it's being able to identify which particular pages are slow, because it might not be all of them, it might just be particular ones. That could be down to either the content on the page or down to the code. You know, if you've got custom web parts, for example. And then isolating, is it a back-end server problem, or is it a front-end issue, so network or client side? And so all of this information then leads you to, where should I invest my time optimizing? So rather than just hunting around in the dark, it's giving you a point where you can then start to investigate further. So as far as getting this kind of information, it is really dead simple. You can be up and running within 5 minutes. There is 2 lines of JavaScript that you need to put into your web pages, one that goes in the head of the page and one which goes in the body, typically. And the normal way people would put this into something like SharePoint Online would be just to modify the master page to include these 2 lines. So very simple. Once the JavaScript has been put into the page, the sequence of events is basically like this. So users would navigate those pages as they normally would, using whichever browser they choose. But then after the onload event, which signifies that that page load is actually completed, then some additional data is beaconed back to the WebTuner server. And like Microsoft, we have both software as a service or on-premise solutions there, although most people are using the software as a service these days. And that is where all the data gets stored, aggregated, processed, and all the analytics happens. And this is where you then log into through your browser to be able to view that information in the form of reports and dashboards. So all that information is real-time, so you can see straight away who's on the site now and what they're doing, but then you can also look back over, you know, days, weeks, months to see any kind of trends. So what I'll do is show you a quick demo of what that looks like. So I've got an Office 365 site here, which I've put that WebTuner JavaScript into. So this is just a test site that I use. And here we can see, first of all, on the Geo dashboard, we can see where the hits are coming to that site. So the color here indicates performance, being, you know, red being bad, China here 11 seconds, you know, green being good, so India's getting fairly good performance. And then the size of the bubble indicates the number of page requests from that location. So most of the activity is coming from the UK, and the average response time there is 7.6 seconds. So we can actually drill down from a country level. Let's just do that. If we drill down from the the country level to have a look at the UK, we can see some particular users within the UK, and we can click into them. So let's go for this one up here because this one is me, British Telecom. So once you get down into an individual user session, you can see their IP address, their country, the browser type they use, the operating system, and who was the owner of that IP address. You can then see in the lower half of the screen here every single page that that person has visited and the timing information. So that particular page load time there, where we hit this slow page.aspx, took 10.6 seconds to load. It took 1.8 seconds roughly to get the first byte, and then it took a further 8.8 seconds to get the page content, because in that example there's I think it's a 10 megabyte image within the page. So that's the kind of one use case, which is coming from that kind of global view and then getting very quickly all the way down into an individual user view. The other way people use the product is if you go to the Performance tab and have a look at some of this kind of trend information. So you can see over time, here we're looking at 8 hours. The key metrics here, number of page views, number of visitors, and the response time. But then you can segment that however you like. So at the moment we're looking by browser type. So you can answer questions like what's the most popular browser that people are using, or which is the slowest browser that people are using to access the site. Similarly, by operating system, you could do the same kind of thing. So seeing how many users are coming from Macs, Windows 7, iPhones, and other mobile devices, as I mentioned, and again, what the performance was like for those. We could do it by page title or the page path, which is a URL basically. So we can have a look at all the pages that have been accessed and see which are the slowest. So here we've got an example where it's the home page which has got the slowest performance, and this is something that I see time and time again with customers. So 11-second average response time on the home page, and that's the one that's getting the most number of hits and the most number of visitors as well. So actually that's the one that you should be tuning and optimizing the most, more than others, because that will have a negative impression on the user's perception of the whole site just by having a slow home page. So there's other ways of kind of navigating the data. I'm not going to go through everything today, but I just wanted to kind of give you a flavor for the product and what's available. So if I just go back over to my slide presentation, I just wanted to point out that both the products that you've seen today, so Exoprise, CloudReady, and WebTuna, the real user monitoring that I just showed you, both have free trials available. So if you're interested in seeing one or both of those products, send an email to the address at the bottom there, info@applicationperformance.com, and we can help you get set up with that. As I said, with both products, the setup time is minimal. You should be up and running within minutes, really. So with WebTuna, it's just adding the JavaScript into your master page. And with Exoprise, it's just downloading a software agent and then choosing which of the sensors that you want to use. So yes, I think that was all I had for today's presentation. So I'm going to hand back to Zoe, and she can run through any questions that have come in.
Great. Thank you very much, Mick, and thank you, Patrick, for very interesting presentations. While the presentations were in progress, a number of you asked questions which I'd now like to pose on behalf of the audience. Firstly, one for Mick, actually. Can you add the WebTuna code to Office 365 without changing the master page?
That is a good question, and there are ways to do it, but I think the easiest is the master page. With on-premise, you've got a lot more options, because you can use like IAS URL rewriters, or you can use your load balancer or application delivery controller to inject the JavaScript. Yeah, with Office 365 it's a little bit more limited, and the master page is the easiest, but there are some other ways to get in contact. We can talk about that in a bit more detail.
Thank you. And Patrick, somebody's asked, where should I be monitoring from? My data center or every user's desktop or laptop?
Good question. We get that one a lot. So with synthetic monitoring, one of the advantages from a deployment standpoint is that you can monitor without having to manage software on each individual user's desktop or laptop. Ideally, you want to be monitoring from systems that are on the same network as the user. So we would typically recommend, if you have like an admin workstation that's on the same LAN segment as the users that you're trying to support, that's a good opportunity or good option. With CloudReady, we built it so that it can run without impacting the performance of the system that it's on. So I'm running it on a laptop that I use daily. I'm running it on a Windows Surface Pro. You can run it on a pretty lightweight Windows machine, but it's important. You want to be more so on the network with the users rather than in the data center, because that's where the actual network segments that could impact the users would be located. And then you want to monitor from the locations where your users are. So if you have multiple branch offices, you want to be monitoring from each of those, because the performance and availability will differ because the routes to the app differ as well.
Thanks. And Mick, someone else has asked, do the products WebTuna and Exoprise work with other applications outside of Office 365?
Yes, certainly do. So WebTuna will work with any web application that's been accessed through a browser, so it's just JavaScript. So that, yeah, there are some specific features we put in there for SharePoint and SharePoint Online, but yeah, 99% of the features will apply to any kind of web application. And yeah, with Exoprise, obviously there's a lot more beyond Office 365. I'll let Patrick answer that one.
It's very similar. We, as I shown on one of the slides, we have certain sensors that are specifically built to support the needs of specific applications, like Exchange Online, which goes through an API, or SharePoint Online, which navigates the site in a certain way. And then we also have some more generic sensors that can be pointed at virtually any website or application. So you can cover pretty much anything that you're using.
Thank you. And another question, Patrick. Can I integrate CloudReady with SCOM, the System Center Operations Manager?
You can, actually. So one of the capabilities that is built into CloudReady, because a lot of people will already have a system in place, whether it's SCOM or it's BMC or CA or something like ServiceNow. So generally, there'll be some other downstream service management application. With CloudReady, the way we do that is we allow you to log alarm data to an NT event log on one of the systems in your network, and then you can scoop that up and incorporate that and do your alerting and workflows based off of that out from a tool like SCOM.
Okay, and someone else also wanted to know, doesn't Microsoft provide tools to monitor and troubleshoot Office 365?
Well, they do provide tools to troubleshoot. So in addition to the Service Health Dashboard, which we saw, they have some connection diagnostic tools that you can run. But that is different than monitoring in that you can't run those tools continuously. They're really made for, once you detect that there is a problem, helping you further diagnose and find specific problems. Those tools get very fine-grained in terms of looking at specific DNS entries and testing some more elaborate test scenarios than what we do on a regular basis with the monitoring in CloudReady. So those tools are for diagnosis. There is a SCOM management pack, but it primarily provides a local access to the same information that is on the Service Health Dashboard itself. So it doesn't provide a robust real-time monitoring solution across your locations. It's still fairly rudimentary in its capabilities today.
Okay, thanks. And someone else has said, if I can't fix any of the problems outside my network, what good does it do for me to monitor outside my network?
Well, as I had indicated, that's kind of part of the problem in that if you aren't monitoring those pieces end to end, you're really at the mercy of your service providers, both your network service provider and the cloud service provider, to fix any issues that you may encounter. And if you can't provide them with a detailed a record of what you're seeing and what specific problems, that process is going to take a lot longer. So where you may have been able to resolve problems with Exchange when you was on premise, if nothing else, you could reboot the server and have it be up and running in a few minutes. Your lead time to get to resolution as you go through and contact these vendors and try and sort through problems can be quite lengthy. So it's actually even more critical than ever to monitor outside your network so that you can help them help you as quickly as possible when the issues are outside your network.
Great. Well, thank you both to Patrick and Mick for answering so many questions as well. So this concludes today's presentation. We hope that you've enjoyed it, and we've recorded this webinar, and we will send you a link to the recording in the next few days. So thank you for attending, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks, and goodbye.